you could say he goes to the Nationals. I would not be surprised. Like he could go anywhere.
Gallo, him and Gallo.
Joey Gallo. Yep.
That's the dream team.
Dynamic duo.
Welcome to episode 2 of the Inside Scoop. I'm your host, Jake Sirkus. Joined alongside me, the boys, Michael Marino, Jack Azoulay-Haron. All our ats are on the screen. Boys, how we doing? It's been a while, but we got a lot to go to cover today. How we doing?
I'm good, man. I'm doing well.
Yep, doing well. Hoping for some more news, hopefully relatively soon, but I'm pessimistic. So
we were talking about it before the show about how kind of this is reminiscent of, I forget what year it was, but the Machado and Harper years where everybody was waiting for them to sign, and then they're like, all right, screw it, we'll just start signing because these guys aren't going to sign until spring training. And Machado was like late January, and then Harper was like a week before pitchers and catchers reported. So I think that was what, 2018, 2019ish.
Yeah, he did his presser in at the facility for the Phillies in spring training. That was pretty fun.
So hopefully some moves come soon. We're going to talk about Blake Snell, Cody Bellinger, the top free agents left on the board. But Marino, Mike, you had a scoop today about an international prospect, and you are saying this could turn into one of the bigger stories in Major League Baseball about, you specified and said, player age falsification. So Raimel Ortiz, the number 26 player in the 2024 international prospect class, the Mets had a deal with him. It fell through, allegedly falsified some age details. What can you say about this without kind of going into any crazy speculatory stuff? More details will come out, but what do you have for us right now on that?
Now, what I know is this is a guy that was highly coveted, and we're talking about likely a deal in the 7-figure range. I mean, he is, when you get to that kind of echelon, we're talking about millions. So it's a big deal that this fell through. Now, the big question is, you look back through time, it used to be a huge deal, and it was terrible. And you have literally former MVPs who have either said that they lied about their age, have been accused of lying about their age. You have multiple players through time who have had completely different identities and kind of hidden their actual identity from the public to lie. And why does this happen? Well, it's pretty simple. When you are as good as you are, you're going to have more value if you're 17 than when you're 19, because those 2 extra years give the team kind of more years of your prime in terms of that contract. And so it's believed to be that he lied about his age. Now, my understanding is there are others that thing. He's not alone. I think this really kind of, as the weeks progress, you'll start to hear other names, other big, high-profile guys who have lied about their age by multiple years. We're not talking about a year. This could be upwards of 3-4 years with some of these players. So completely different ages. And what does that do? It pushes them into the next free agent class. So Raimel Ortiz likely to be in next year's international free agent class, kind of because of this whole mishap. So big news for the Mets, and it's big news for baseball as kind of we await to see how big of an issue this is. He's probably not a standalone. So we're going to have to find out who else did. And, the questions can stem bigger. Obviously, this is an issue with the Mets right now. Are there any other players in Major League Baseball who came to the international realm who also might have lied about their age? And so we're going to kind of slowly figure out how big of an issue is this? How long has this gone back? Because it appeared there was a small period of time where that kind of let up. How big of an issue is it? Did it ever stop? And are there major league players right now who have lied about their age? These are questions that are being asked by MLB executives that expect to kind of learn more details over the coming days and weeks.
This is like, it's kind of interesting because there's all these stories in the NBA about players who retired 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago who, I lied about my age or whatever, and no one actually really ever knew how old I was. I forget which player it was. I think it might have been Manute Bol. No one ever really ended up finding out how old he was. And now we get into like modern day baseball, where you mentioned that a while ago this was a big deal and it hasn't been that way anymore. But how does this get discovered? Like how is what transpired for it to be today where this is now going to turn into a bigger thing?
So the deal fell apart a few weeks ago, and there was a lot of uncertainty about what happened. Now, really, it works through the MLB is usually how it goes. They need kind of official documentation from, the country, whether that be birth certificates or, any type of form like that. And so I think since kind of the crackdown on like a few from years ago, they've kind of tightened these protocols and there's been less kind of slipping through the cracks. And what ends up happening, and again, the question is how many are there, is they get their official documentation and they're like, hey, your birthday, this is, 20, you're not 17, this is 21. And, that's a huge deal for these teams. And obviously, if you're lying as a 17-year-old joining a new organization, that's still a huge red flag. But you understand why they do it, because they're probably from less fortunate situations. They need the cash, and they're told by older players, hopefully not agents, like, maybe take off a year or two. And so it's a huge deal. And I think it's something that's going to gain a ton of steam over the next days and weeks as kind of reporters, national guys start to dig into this.
So obviously, Marino will have that latest going in the next couple of days. Jack, you've been pretty quiet. Let's move on, unless you have something to say about this topic. If not, we can move on.
No, I mean, I kind of want to echo everything Mario said, and to note that this has happened a lot in the past. I think one of the biggest examples that was kind of notarized would be Miguel Tejada. And there are certainly other players that are definitely not known publicly, I would say, that are in similar situations that had very successful major league careers. So I don't have anything in terms of information to add, but I definitely think it'll be interesting to watch and monitor over the next few months or so.
All right, let's go back to the bigs. One of the, I think, more underrated free agents on the market was sent to Texas at the deadline. Jordan Montgomery, who rumored to potentially go back to Texas. Jack, I'll start with you here. What's the latest on Monty? I know a lot of Yankee fans kind of potentially want a reunion there. Is probably still looking for another starter. But what is the latest on the hot stove with Mr. Jordan Montgomery?
Yeah, so my understanding regarding Montgomery, this is a guy that really boosted his value in the postseason. Obviously, he was really a fringe 4, maybe even a 3 starter. You could maybe argue before he was traded to St. Louis. He got a little better, and then you really saw him take off in Texas. And that couldn't have been a better time for him. Now he's a free agent. His agent is Scott Boras, so he's looking for the most amount of money possible. And my understanding is things have kind of gotten to the point, and things are trending towards a reunion with Texas. Now nothing is set in stone at all. Remotely, but numbers are definitely being talked still, and Monty's number one destination in terms of where he wants to go is back to Texas. So my personal speculative brain would say he goes back there, but again, my understanding is sides have definitely been in contact. I know John Heyman had reported that the Red Sox really like him. Now I'm not going to deny that. I'm sure they like the pitcher. I do question their ability to go to where the Rangers would go after the TV deal had kind of been settled. But it is John Heyman, and it is a Scott Boras client, and we kind of know how that goes a lot of the time. Boras will kind of mention a few teams to potentially get the other team to maybe budge. So I would kind of look at this as, Texas at the forefront of these talks. And then you could look at the Red Sox as kind of on the back burner. Definitely, I'm not saying there's no interest there, but I would say, Texas is definitely a more likely destination. And I know, Sirkus mentioned the Yankees. Now I would not expect a reunion there. There have been some conflicting reports in terms of, Monty, had a really sour exit from the Bronx. Now, I don't know if that's necessarily true or not. I've heard, very different things in that regard. But I can say for sure that, the Yankees are looking elsewhere at the moment. And I can kind of segue from that just real quick, because now it's off the top of my head. The Yankees, Jack Curry had reported not to look at Hector Neris as an option. Now, they are definitely, however, in contact with both Keenan Middleton and Wandy Peralta on a potential reunion, and I do expect them to end up with one, if not both of them. Middleton really pitched well down the stretch for them. But yeah, that's kind of what I have on Monty at the moment, and also just a quick little nugget on the Yankees bullpen.
I feel like for the Yanks perspective, that would be the last check mark to make on their offseason wish list. Got a big star in Soto. Got a guy who they'll have a lot of fun with on social media, I'm sure, with Marcus Stroman. And my take with Stroman is this as a Yankee fan. Like, obviously, it was really fun to do it when he was in Toronto with the whole social media stuff, and he got in fights. I'm sure half the fan base is blocked from him on social
Me
media.
too.
But
by Marcus Stroman, for the record.
but my whole perspective is he can be whoever the hell he wants to be when he's not on the mound. But from 7 to 10 p.m. every fifth day, if he goes out there and does his job, he'll have no problems with the fans, I'm sure, because that is a position that they have struggled with the last couple of years. And I feel like Stroman has a lot to prove. But back to the reliever side of things, Middleton, Neris, and then obviously a reunion with Peralta. I feel like if they get one of those three guys you said likely or more likely, the two in-house guys, I guess Peralta, the two in-house guys, Middleton and Peralta, a reunion there would be much welcomed for the Yankees fans.
Yeah, absolutely.
Reno, anything on
Yeah,
Monty
I can touch on the bullpen market for sure.
For sure, yeah. Let's go into that.
Yeah, so I'll talk about, I believe it was it Andy Martino who mentioned Hector Neris as one of the guys they were looking at. I think Wandy Peralta might have also been in there, and Aroldis Chapman who went. Now, here's what I can tell you. Ryan Stanek, he's a guy they really covet. And this is a name that's kind of been thrown around, but no steam there. My understanding is he is one of their top options in the bullpen. I believe an offer to him would reflect that when compared to other offers they have out. Now, I'll kind of take you down what their strategy is. Really, they've talked to everyone. They have a price on everyone, and David Stearns comes in with an open mind, thinking that most relievers can provide value to you at some point in the season. And he's spoken a ton about how at the beginning of the season versus the end of the season, our bullpen's going to look very different. Now, what they are doing right now is essentially taking a whole snapshot of the market, talking to everyone and their agent about money, about role, about what they, how they think they can utilize them. And they have offers out. And so they're going to try to see where they can line up. And really, it comes down to who can they get at the price they like. It remains to be seen if Ryan Stanek is one of those guys, but he's definitely one of their top options. Hector Neris, another one that they're monitoring. They do really like him, but I have a feeling they're a little bit off on price there, whereas I think they're a little closer, at least at the moment, with Stanek. And so we'll kind of have to see how that pans out. I know they want minimum one. They wouldn't be upset if they got two. And, who knows if they can get kind of maybe lower profile options to make that three.
The longer that we go, obviously, like it seems like the hater stuff came out of nowhere for Houston, but I feel like every year we're in a situation where teams are poaching off of Houston's roster because they just don't re-sign their guys. As we get closer to spring training and camp and stuff, will there be any push from Houston to try to maybe get these guys back, Stanek and Neris?
It's tricky to say. I mean, sure, it's always possible. Obviously, teams like the Astros and the Rays, Stearns, like these presidents of baseball operations think in very similar ways because they're analytically driven. And so they end up targeting the exact same players and come in at different offers that are all about pretty much the same. Minus maybe 2-3 million a year. And so I have no reason to believe the Astros wouldn't want either of them back. They're great players. They figured out kind of how to best utilize them. But that remains to be seen. And I think the strong interest from other teams probably drives them away. Although I don't think it's impossible we see a return with either one of them. Probably more likely Hector Neris, if any of the two.
Do we want to mention Hader at all? Kind of because there was not really any buzz with him in Houston. It came out of left field a little bit, but he'll close for them. I mean, that's when you can get a guy like that for a price point in the numbers that Hader ended up signing for. Obviously, it's going to be pretty noteworthy because there aren't many relievers that make that type of money. But Houston making a splash for, they'll do it every once in a while. A very smart organization. This is a move that seemed like they really wanted to make, huh?
Yeah, I can touch on this especially because I think the way the Astros are operating now is particularly interesting. You would have never seen this move 3 years ago. When Lunhow was there, when Jim Crane was there, you would have never seen the Astros dish out $19 million to a reliever. I think this, of all things, really signals an organizational shift of how they're going to go with things going forward. I think Jose Abreu also was a sign of that. They're not going to be as analytical as they were in the past. I think Jim Crane kind of had enough of that, which is a little bit concerning considering how successful they were with that kind of model. But a guy like Hader, again, this is a guy who, from an analytical perspective, like, if he's, going to be the closer, he's only pitching, 3 outs, which was a really big thing because he didn't want to pitch, anything but the ninth inning, those 3 outs for arbitration money and for his health. Now, you may see him used in, slightly different roles as well, potentially multi-inning, maybe 4 outs even, which is something you never really saw with Milwaukee kind of towards the end of his tenure there, or San Diego, for the purposes of arbitration and for the purposes of preserving his health. But, he has his money now, so he can kind of, they can kind of use him however they'd like. But I do think also, the Hader market, I don't think there were many players, and I'm kind of surprised he got the money he had, because I don't really think many teams would have been willing to go, nearly $20 million a year at 19. I know Texas was a team that they really wanted him at the beginning of the offseason, but I just think they were kind of driven out of the price range, considering the, TV situation they have. They also still need to bring back, a starter, whether it's Monty or elsewhere. This is a guy that Texas they really liked, but really just they were kind of balking at the price. So, I think, for Houston, this is a great addition. And now their bullpen is, in my opinion, the best in baseball. Maybe they could use another arm, but that back end of Abreu, Presley, and Hader is really tough to beat. But I really would just say it really signals an organizational and philosophical change, just generally speaking, which I think is really the big thing here.
Anything, Marino?
I'll add. I mean, when you see Hader get $19 million a year, and if I'm remembering correctly, I don't think any of it was deferred, which is why it was the highest present value reliever contract ever given out. You take a team like Texas, who's having TV revenue questions, issues, and they're dishing out $19 million to a closer. Well, what if they could have used that money to strengthen their rotation, which needs help? And that's why you saw some of these teams who need starters as well kind of balk at that price, because they want to save some of this money to get a starter. And when you're talking about, it's a huge discussion. You're talking about maybe 70 innings of reliever versus ideally 170, 200 innings of a starter. And that's what's the value of an elite closer versus a really good starter. And are those prices, if they're the same, which one of those are you preferring? So a lot of the teams balk at signing one of the best relievers in baseball, which I think is telling of this path that, hey, maybe the starters are as important as they used to be when they were going 8-9 innings, right? Like, we're starting to see this shift back to teams with strong starters are making big postseason runs. Once the Nationals did that with Scherzer and Strasburg, and that was kind of what led their rotation. You've seen a lot of other instances recently. So this trend towards the value in starting pitching has driven these teams away from dishing out $20 million to a reliever. That's where we're at now. Obviously, the guys available, not in that $19 million range, a lot less, probably closer to like 8 to 10.
And Chapman got what, 10, 11 from Pittsburgh?
Yeah, and that's 1 year. I think Stanek, Norris, we're probably looking at 2-3 years. So maybe similar AAV, maybe a little bit less depending on which one and which team, but around that zone.
So speaking of 170 plus innings and teams balking at prices, let's go into Blake Snell, the reigning National League Cy Young Award winner, who is still homeless right now, does not have a team just about a month before pitchers and catchers report. So the report last week, I don't know if this is still accurate or if it ever was accurate, that the Yankees were the only team to make an official offer to Blake Snell. Guys, where are we at with this right now? What's the timeline with Blake Snell? Why does nobody want him?
Yeah,
maybe not nobody wants him, but what's going on here?
Yeah, I'll let Marino get into the majority of it, but I will just say from the Yankees side, I was unable to confirm that there was a formal offer made. I think the two sides discussed those terms, but I really don't think this was ever a formal, hey, you take this right now, you're a Yankee. I'm not necessarily sure that was entirely what it was. The Yankees had interest in Snell, and this was before the Stroman signing. I wouldn't count them fully out. I would be very surprised, though, from the Yankees' perspective. But I'll let Marino get in the rest of the Snell market.
It's tricky, and this is one of the harder evaluations we've had in quite some time. You have a guy who's now won his second Cy Young, but kind of is like an every other season type of guy, right? He has, even this year at the beginning, it was a rough start, and then like boom, he flips the switch and he's back to vintage Blake Snell. Typically doesn't go very deep into games, which is going to hurt his value. A lot of that just because he's what I like to call a nibbler. He doesn't throw a lot of strikes. He kind of works around the zone, tries to get swing and miss, ends up walking, too many guys. And that ends up prolonging these innings and the pitch count. And fifth inning comes around, he's at 100 pitches. That's kind of the give and take that you have with Blake Snell. Now, the upside is he's a Cy Young pitcher when he's on, and he will really be that guy for your rotation when he's clicking. I think there's just a lot of questions about who is he? Is he the Cy Young pitcher? Or is he the other version of Blake Snell, which is walks too many guys, doesn't go deep into games enough, and maybe that ERA might be much higher than what it was this year? Those are the questions these teams are asking, especially when you're talking about a big commitment, maybe something around 6/150, which I think was thrown around by Heyman with the Yankees. I have a feeling here that the team for him is not obvious. I wouldn't be shocked if a team, and I think I said it before, if a team like the Angels or the Giants, who really could use starting pitching, but they're not one of those big market clubs, if they say, you know what, let's just pay that little premium of $5 million extra and get him here. Those are two teams that to me stick out as like under the radar spots. I just don't think any of the big market teams that are as in as we might have thought, at least the price point. Now, if anything, the price could drop. That could, invite multiple teams into this race because I think they're balking at the price, at least at the moment. I think we need to be open to a wide variety of landing spots here because I don't think there's a clear one right now. And I think this one could be closer to when pitchers and catchers report.
From my perspective on Blake Snell, let's kind of get into the numbers a little bit because it's an interesting market and it's an interesting player at this point in his career. First of all, it's his, I believe, 8th full season since 2017, if the math adds up. 180 innings, that's 0.2 innings off of his career high. And when you're a pitcher, 31 years old, that's the prime of your career. But if you're coming off the career high in innings, doesn't always get better for you the following year. He's not a 2.25 ERA guy. Everybody knows that. It was a magic in a bottle type second half and, late June into the second half of the season run for Blake Snell. The walks were at a career high. The strikeouts were right around career average. And a name that I want to throw out there, it was way back in November, Aaron Nola, who did not have a great Aaron Nola year. He got 7.172, just a year younger. So the terms that have been thrown around for Snell, 6.150, whatever it is, 6.160. Do you think his camp, Boris and co, are a little maybe disrespected by seeing Nola get that coming off of the season that he had, and now Snell with the Cy Young kind of looking to, at the very least, get the biggest pitching contract of the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, I think I can touch on that. I think they're two vastly very different situations. Player A, I'll say Aaron Nola, they paid him for his floor. Aaron Nola, he could very well be a Cy Young candidate. I think he's fantastic. I still think he's a top 10 pitcher going into next season.
I agree.
He's going to throw absurd amounts of innings. He's good for at least 180 innings. He may get to 200, and which, 200 is the new 225 at this point. 180 is the new 200, for that kind of line of thinking. So you're paying Aaron Nola for his floor. You're paying him to go out there every 5 days and give you 6 innings of 3-run baseball. Blake Snell, on the other hand, he strikes at a lot of batters. He also walks an absurd amount of batters. You're paying him for his, peak, his ceiling, because the highs are really high, as we saw last, down the stretch. The lows are incredibly low, as we saw at the beginning of the season, the season prior. And you really have to think of that risk. And I think a lot of teams, they look at Aaron Nola and they think there's kind of minimal. Aaron Nola, I feel like, is a very risk-free starting pitcher, relatively speaking. This is one of the more durable pitchers, in the league. He throws a number of different pitches. He doesn't have a trouble going in deep into games. And Snell, he's good for maybe 5 innings on a good day, and not 5 innings on a good day. He's maybe good for 5 innings on a regular day, and 6 innings on a good day. You pay him for his stuff. And kind of similarly, I kind of think of him as a bit of a poor man's Tyler Glasnow. Glasnow, sure, he has thrown less innings due to injury, but when he's on, you can't touch him. Snell, when he's on, you also can't touch him. But, there have been times with Snell where his stuff has been kind of off and his mechanics have been a little inconsistent. And you can attribute that to command issues and control issues. So I am not at all surprised. And I think Boris and, company would be kind of, remiss to compare him to a guy like Nola. I think really they should be comparing him to more of a Tyler Glasnow type pitcher who got an extension. I certainly think that Tyler Glasnow is a step above Blake Snell. Obviously, he didn't get the money that Blake Snell may get just due to injury concerns. But I think, when you think about pitchers in general, you really have to, classify them and categorize them in such a way where you're accounting for what they bring to a table, because the starting pitcher is one position, but there are so many different types of, players that fill that one void in position.
I'll add on. I mean, I think it's pretty clear how different those two guys are. You look at Aaron Nola, sits 91. He's sat 91 like pretty much every year. You know exactly what you're getting. Might give up the long ball a little bit too much, for a month or 2 months, but you trust his floor. You trust he's going to give you innings. And if he gives you those innings, he'll get that WAR that you are hoping, he achieves. Not the same story with Snell, much more of a high variance guy. At his peak, probably better than Nola, but the variance is kind of what people are digging him for. Not a shock. Same type of thing with Bellinger, right? Where you're like, all right, how much is this guy going to get paid? He had coming off a great year, but you look before it, not nearly as good. And that could be, a segue into Bellinger, which definitely has more of an unclear market. And I could kind of lead us off here. His market's really interesting, and it's interesting because no one knows anything about it, and that's the whole problem. You've seen, the Blue Jays were a team. That was something I heard, that the Blue Jays were a team to watch. Well, now not as much. They've kind of pumped the brakes on Cody Bellinger. Originally, questions about, was Seattle maybe interested? Now there's doubts about Seattle. Everyone wants to point to the Cubs, right? The Cubs are the logical team. They just had him. He had a great year. Here's the problem, at least in my mind. I checked in about 3 months ago, and on Cody Bellinger and the Cubs. What I got was like, if he's going to get the money that they think he's going to get, he's not going to be a Cub. Now, the problem is they can't find anyone who will pay him that money, which brings the Cubs back into the question. So if he doesn't get the contract that we're all expecting, I think the Cubs are in play. But if he gets someone to pay something close to what his ask is right now, that team is probably landing Cody Bellinger. And that's really what it comes down to, is what's the price tag? And sure, if it's in the Cubs budget, then that's probably, something to watch. But will it get down to the price to where the Cubs say, you know what, he was great for us this year. Let's not overthink this. Let's just give him the money.
Anything, Jack?
I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. I think Bellinger is a guy who, on paper, he had over 300, different style of play relative to his MVP season. And, I'm the kind of guy to say that different style is frankly much worse and much more, a lot more variance involved. You could see him repeat that. I personally am very skeptical. And if he did, great for him. But contact rate, while it's good, the hard hits rates are not very good. So I am, kind of the Cody Bellinger denier / skeptic. And for many teams, you're getting the value from his center field defense. And you're maybe banking on that to kind of boost his contract so it doesn't become an albatross. But, I would say at this point, similar to what Marino said, this is a guy who could go anywhere. And, you could say he goes to the Nationals. I would not be surprised. Like he could go anywhere.
Gallo. Him and Gallo.
Gallo. Yep.
That's the dream team.
Dynamic duo.
Yeah. So I would not be surprised if he goes anywhere. The Cubs, obviously the logical destination, but also, things could suggest that he want to go elsewhere. So I don't know. I think he's an interesting guy to monitor as we go into spring training here.
I got one more thing here, just for anyone who's a Mets fan tuning in.
Give us the Mets stuff.
Yeah,
give us all the Mets stuff.
To you.
Yeah.
Everyone asks, are they getting a DH? That's like the big question because they know they're getting a reliever. Are they getting a DH? The people I've talked to in the last 2 days, they have some doubts. And I know for a lot of Mets fans, that's like frustrating to hear. I just don't think they value, they are worried that guys like Mark Vientos, who might have upside, but might also totally suck. They're worried those guys won't get enough at bats. And I personally see value in signing a Justin Turner so that if Beatty's a mess, you put him at third. If not, you DH him and perfect. I just don't know if they see it like I do. And that's it is what it is. I wouldn't be shocked if they add a DH, a Justin Turner, a JD Martinez, a Jorge Soler. I think those are all great fits for the Mets. And I think they're in at a certain price, but I think at this point they are concerned because they don't think they are talking the same numbers as those players. And that's probably going to lead to them either being out or maybe a value play, or maybe one of those guys comes to that number. And so that's kind of what we have to follow. But there's some doubt that they end up landing a DH. And that's kind of a little bit of a change in the last few days.
They want to give DJ Stewart all those at-bats.
Yeah.
DH, man. I shall add, though, during the whole Mets turmoil, lulls, Mets summer, end of summer, DJ Stewart was their best hitter.
He was fantastic. So. It's hard to evaluate guys like Beatty, who had just had a horrendous year. Mark Vientos, who really realistically didn't get a shot. And so that's a big thing with Stearns. He wants the young guys to get at bats. And he doesn't want to add guys that are going to block him. And that's a huge part of it here.
There you go. All right. We will be back. We'll probably do one once a week. Because, there might be a week where the stove is just absurdly hot. We'll have to do an emergency pod and something like that. But plan for us once a week. All of our ats are around the screen. Marino, Jack, Azoulay-Haron, Jake Sirkus saying so long. We will see you on the Inside Scoop next time.